I'm going to move on and call on Ivy right now, who's one of our favorites. We just adore this Ivy Nelson and think the world of her. So let me introduce her. And then Ivy, do you need me to pass you the presenter screen?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, great. Well, we adore Ivy. She's the Education Technology Manager from Belton School District. This is Ivy doing fantastic work. And we know we have a half hour here for you to share away, and you're going to share about vetting resources for data governance. This is near and dear to my heart. Love it. Okay, so I'm going to grab the screen here and give you presenter status. Hold on. 3, 2, 1. Okay, you're presenter. And thanks so much for joining us, Ivy. We're excited to hear from you today.
So I am from the Belton School District. We are in South Kansas City. We are a district of about 4,500 students. And on the Missouri side, if you're not familiar with Kansas City, there is a Kansas City, Kansas, but we're Missouri. And we are, this school year is very different. And we are doing both in-person and virtual options for our students. So we're a public school district, and because of, COVID and the school closures in the spring, we decided to use some of the COVID grant money that our district received on the federal level, and our county had some COVID grant money, and we have sped up our timeline of going one-to-one K-12. So that is a big change that we're experiencing in our district, and so it was in our strategic plan to be one-to-one K-12 by 2024. Previously, we had one elementary STEAM school that was one-to-one, and then we were one-to-one 7-12. So we are adding devices. We have deployed devices to every single K-6 student that didn't already have them, and that was finished up last week. So all of our in-person and virtual students have a device, an iPad for elementary. Well, K-7 are working with iPads, and then 8th through 12th have MacBooks. So we are increasing our technology. We are dealing with virtual instruction and trying to do the best that we can there. We had really good feedback from parents last spring with how that went. And so we actually have a very high number that wanted to be virtual versus in person. So from the beginning, we had districts around us, and every district was about, they'd survey their families, and they had about 80% in person, 20% online. And our district was more 35% like the virtual option. And so, I feel good about that because it shows that our parents are, happy with how virtual instruction went in the spring. And then we've had an increase in that actually since school has started. Some kids have opted to go virtual. And so a lot of our secondary students are taking the opportunity to, do online learning. So that has been, a challenge for all of our staff. And then the online resources. So in March, April, last spring, whenever I spoke with you guys last time through the Learning Council, there were a ton of companies coming out with free resources for teachers, and free through June, free, sign up now, and all the fees are waived, and yada yada, which is great because teachers need resources, and in times when things are uncertain, it's nice to have things that you can go to use with your students. And on the flip side of that, you have companies that are trying to monopolize maybe on taking advantage of the chaotic times, right? You have teachers who are suddenly forced to teach online completely, and are scrambling for resources and scrambling for, what to do with their kids. And so vetting those resources has been, there was a huge undertaking at the very beginning with all of those companies that were coming out with free resources. And looking at, there was a list that was shared through social media and a lot of our teachers got a hold of, and I went through and vetted that list, looking at COPA compliance, FERPA compliance, if the data was housed on US soil or abroad, and about a third of the resources that had been shared by, countless teachers across the country through Facebook and Twitter and, all of those social media outlets that teachers use to network and have, PLCs, a third of those were what we consider safe for our students and staff in Belton. So that's a scary thing. So something that our district, and this is what the bulk of what I wanted to share today, something that our district has done, and this has been a big undertaking over the last few years with our technology team and then also our instructional coaching team. This is our website, the Belton School District website, and on the curriculum page, this is for staff, on the curriculum page, we have this request for adding additional items to the curriculum, whether it's a unit plan, a lesson plan, or a request for a curriculum resource. So this is something that we have kind of always wanted to do, and we didn't have a way to streamline this. And what used to happen before we started this process a couple years ago, I would get a technology work order where a teacher requested an app. And before I came, which I'm a certified teacher that works in the technology department and with the curriculum department, before I was there, or in districts where they don't have a person like me, somebody from the tech department might just say, okay, here's this app, now you can put it on your iPads. And maybe nobody thinks, okay, well, first of all, does it align with the curriculum? Does it already do what something in our curriculum is already doing? And then on the technical side, does it meet our data governance, policies and all of those procedures and requirements that we have to have there? So I would get a work order that said, please give me access to this app. So I would vet it for COPA compliance, FERPA compliance, all those safety concerns. And then knowing the curriculum for the district, I would kind of be that person too to say, well, we already have this tool that is very similar, or, oh, we don't have anything like this in the curriculum. Okay, here's this app that you can use. And the problem with that is we would have people kind of going off and doing all kinds of things, and we didn't have that consistency. So this has really been a process over the last several years of just kind of streamlining our curriculum, but this curriculum approval process it's working really, really well this year especially, and I am really glad that our district has this in place, because when a teacher wants to use a resource, I refer them to this process. Our instructional coaches refer them to this process. We have some curriculum leaders on grade level teams that refer them to this process. So they go to our website, they go to the staff page, and then they can fill out this information. So this is a copy of what the form looks like. So they fill out this document, and at the top, it has the flow of how it gets approval. And I can zoom in a little bit if we're a little small on the screen. But they do the proposal and submit it, and then a curriculum or a content leader, so that's on their grade level team, takes a look. And then our library and media specialists will vet it for copyright, that it doesn't infringe upon copyright laws. And then the usually a principal or a curriculum supervisor will take a look, and then if they all approve, it goes to our director of school improvement to approve. Once she approves it on the curriculum side, then it's passed to me to approve for technology vetting. So then again, I look at FERPA compliance, COPA compliance, I look at where the data is housed, and then I also look at if it connects to, if it's something like a tool or it requires a software or something like that, then I look at, does it, if it connects to our network, if it is, we have to add software to devices, how does that work? And so we look at that side of it as well. So we want to know that it's safe for all of our students, safe for all of our staff, and then also that it's going to work with the systems that we already have in place. So then, is it approved? Yes, they're notified of the approval. On my side, I would, if it requires an app or something like that, I would put the app in self-service. If it requires if it's a paid subscription, then I would do the purchase order to get that subscription for them. If it is declined, the form is sent back with an explanation. So one example of this that we had recently was we had a software request for a teacher at our middle school, and the app was in their terms of service. It said, prohibited for use by students under 13. And so I rejected that. And then the teacher was notified with an explanation in which he said, oh, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. It's only me using it to create the resources for students. The students won't be creating anything. The students won't be using it, having accounts, anything like that. So then it came back to us, and then we revised and ended up accepting it only for teacher use. So we have instances like that quite a bit. And then it goes down here. So the step is, the teacher fills this part out, the purpose of what they're proposing, any links and things like that, additional information. And then they share it through Google. We're a Google district, so they have their Google Doc that they share. And then these are the links to the on the website. And then we use this part at the bottom where we record our name, who in the, which curriculum leader, which librarian, which principal. So we record our name, and then comments and suggestions. And so this is just kind of for our, documentation and tracking of, okay, where are we in the process, and then, how are we, what, if it was rejected by curriculum, it never gets to me. But then if it gets to me and then I reject it, then, what from the technology side was rejected and why. So then this is the Google form that they use. So they actually take that Google Doc and then they submit it through this Google form with all of the information there, and they copy paste the document that they completed, and then they fill out the technology portion. So then that comes to me. And the reason that we use this Google form, if you're thinking, that seems like an extra step, why can't they just fill out this document and submit the document? Well, on Google Forms, there is a really cool add-on that is called Form Approvals. And so this is a YouTube video that will walk you through how to use the Form Approvals add-on in Google Forms. But we use it because it allows us to go through multiple approvals. So it lets us do this flow chart. So through that add-on in Forms, it can be sent to the curriculum content leader, and then the librarian, and then the curriculum supervisor, and then the director, and then me. So that is kind of the process that we use using technology to go through all of our processes. I will say that we rolled it out at the beginning, so a little over a year ago, the beginning of the school year last year, and we have had a lot of submissions, and we have now, I feel like it's a really solid process in place. And like I said earlier, you know, if I get a work order now requesting an app, which I got a ton, right? Because we just handed out devices to 2,100 students that never had a device before. And so those teachers had never really requested apps, iPad apps before, because their kids didn't have iPads, so they didn't really have the need. So I got a lot of emails saying, hey, I noticed this app isn't in self-service, can we get it? Or a lot of work orders requesting apps. And so then my response can just be, oh, you need to do, you know, that needs to go through the curriculum approval process, and here is the link to the page on the website that you need to go to and start that process. And then I usually include the instructional coach that works with their building as well, so that the instructional coach can help them through that process if they need to as well. But it's gone very well. And in times like these, when you have, you know, a ton of, you know, just a higher, much higher need for virtual instruction and online resources, I am really glad that we rolled this process out when we did, because now, you know, it's really solid moving through. The only thing that we haven't really solidified in the process is having kind of cutoffs for when we accept submissions for curriculum additions. That has been just kind of a fluid thing, and that would be my one complaint, if I had to pick a complaint, because I feel as though I'm, you know, every week I get like a new request to go vet something, and for my sake, it would be nice to just have, you know, okay, we have a first quarter submission or a first semester submission, and, you know, in October, we're going to review all the first semester submissions, approve or deny, and then we'll do all the ordering and that kind of stuff. Because you know, like if it's approved in technology, then I have some steps afterwards to either, you know, put the app in our self-service or to create the PO and order the software, and that kind of stuff, which is, you know, time consuming as well. So it's kind of, it's a big task to keep up with all of the requests and approvals and things when they're rolling in, you know, at different times, and almost feels kind of like a constant thing. But, you know, the flip side to that, and looking at the, you know, glass half full, is that we don't limit our teachers to time limits with when they can request new resources and things like that. So it is nice to be able to give those resources to our staff when they request them, and not make them wait, you know, until it's a more opportune time, you know, for our group to get together and vet and approve and do all that stuff. So that is the process, and that is the bulk of what I wanted to share today. Are there questions or thoughts, or districts doing anything similar or better even?
I don't know if we could say better, but there's, you know, Learning Council has seen a lot of processes out there. This was a great one to learn about. Ivy, awesome. And I understand your frustration with it's a constant process. It's never going to end. I have Eric Ursich, who's on the line from SD Math. You want to ask your question, Eric? You can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Leilani. Thank you, Ivy. That was it's very interesting to see the process that you guys have created for this. My question is that's a process for internal requests during this time when you're, especially in the spring, when you got flooded with everybody and their brother asking, you know, here, take our stuff for free, and you had to vet everything. Do you now have a process for external requests to be reviewed and vetted?
Do you mean like if we have a parent assisting their child virtually?
No, if you have a company that's interested in asking for their services to be reviewed and possibly included into your curricular resources.
Oh, that is kind of a different, we would go about that differently. We have we have kind of a group that meets with vendors. So they would either come to usually contact someone from usually like our tech director if it's a technology company, or our school improvement director if it is a more curriculum oriented product, and just kind of usually we do, a demo with them, and then if we are interested in the product, then we would vet it on the technology side. And so usually I am in both of those meetings, whether they're with our director of technology or our director of school improvement, and then I kind of serve as the tech person on that side as well. And whenever we have a demo for anything, I always have that in the back of my mind. I'm thinking about, okay, so it's going to require an iPad app and it's COPA compliant, and and I have those little
That whole checklist.
yeah.
So starting
But
with those two
we
folks
don't.
is mainly how you guys get started, right?
Yes, yeah. So we don't, we don't really have that for, we don't make a company necessarily fill out that type of information, but it's definitely something that we look at and we consider when we are, doing any sort of entertaining any sort of vendors at all. We have had, though, as far as like external, we have had some parents make requests for different things. And two requests I can think of off the top of my head. And either approving or denying based on whatever that was. One of them was this dad was wanting Minecraft for education, which I think is a great resource, and my son loves it, but you have to have a Microsoft Office account or a Microsoft account, and since we are a Google district, we don't have that for our students, so it's just not something logistically that we would be able to do. So that was kind of an external, and that just kind of goes. We have a right now it's like a tech help request form that anyone can fill out. It's on our website, so any parent, any student, anybody associated with the school district that has kind of a tech help request need at all. And then that is like our tech department gets notified of that. So that's kind of our way to reach external people for, mostly right now it's for support. A virtual student cracks their iPad screen and the parent fills it out to request, a repair. But we've also had, that's how the Minecraft for education request came about, requests for hotspots, things like that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, Ivy, I don't see any questions, but I have questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
So talk to me about your structure then in terms of time. Like, did you guys move to different sort of schedules and all that other kind of stuff that has really backlashed on what's in use and sort of created a tidal wave on you?
Not necessarily. Well, okay, so first of all, let me clarify. Do you mean time frames as far as schedules for school, like school schedules, student schedules, or time frames for when we do vettings and approvals and things?
No, the overall time schedule. Like, did you guys move to like different blocks and then, like segmenting people into A, B, and, all those different things that are going on around the country? It's kind of wild. And it has such a, cascading effect back on teacher planning, because they're like, what hour am I in? What day am I on an alternate day? Blah, blah, blah.
Yes, we are not. No, we have, and I think that is due to we had a larger chunk of our students who were interested in virtual from the beginning. So we compare ourselves to a Ray Peck is a district very near us, and they were 80% in person, and we were more, 60 to 70% in person from the beginning. So looking at those numbers, our district could safely social distance and have the minimum. We have a minimum of 3 feet at all times wearing masks, and so that was so we haven't been able, or we haven't had to do any sort of like, okay, half the freshmen come today, half the freshmen come tomorrow, that sort of thing. We do though have, so we have either all in person or all virtual are the 2 options. And for our elementary grades, we have in-person teachers who have students in class all day long. And then we have virtual teachers who only teach a section of virtual students. So the big thing there is when we had, school started, and then we had students switch to virtual. So they were going to be in person, and then they've switched to virtual. Those numbers have gotten kind of high. So we are now kind of looking at, goodness, this virtual teacher for 3rd grade at this one building has 32 students, and the in-person teachers only have, maybe 20 students. And so that has been a struggle. And then our secondary, they are doing, and in the reentry, we had reentry committees, and so our leaders from our secondary buildings said, we can't do the same as the elementary. We can't have, you can't have a fax teacher, an in-person fax teacher, and a virtual fax teacher, because sometimes you only have that one teacher. So, and they're very passionate about, this is my content area and my students, and so they decided for secondary that every teacher would be in person, teaching students in person, and simultaneously teaching virtual students. So a lot of what those teachers are doing is class starts and they have a Zoom meeting going on. So they are teaching in person to a group of kids, and then students are watching the lesson through Zoom as well. And so that has been a lot, for those teachers as well. And then on the other side of it, you have students who are online all day long. Whereas, for elementary, the virtual teachers, they have their morning meetings, they do their instruction, and then students log out of Zoom and they work the rest of the day, or however long, it takes them to complete their assignments during the rest of the day. But then our secondary students, you've got math first hour, so I log into my math Zoom and I work on that, and then time for second hour, I've got to go to my history Zoom, and then third hour I go to my PE Zoom, and then and so you have kids kind of just in back-to-back Zoom meetings sometimes all day long, and that so that's a struggle with, well, what's really recommended for how much online time a student should be getting. And we're kind of trying to, that tradition, we're trying to do new things, but keeping the traditional way of instruction. And so, we've got to kind of meld that together and figure out how to do new instruction in new ways. And so, that's where we're at right now. Not that it's, the best thing anybody's doing, but it's working, and our teachers are, working harder. And that's what every teacher has told me this year. Like, I am working harder than I've ever worked before. I had a meeting yesterday with the elementary music teacher And so she has 200 students in person, and then she has an additional, then she's the K4 virtual music teacher. So basically any K4 virtual student has her for music. So we worked on iMovie and QuickTime and doing screen recordings and how she can record herself singing along to songs while also picking up the song, and doing a lot of audio visual stuff, and she is doing amazing things for elementary music. And that's what she's like, I have been teaching for close to 30 years and I am working harder than I have ever worked in my life. And that's true of everybody right now, really, in education.
Yeah, it really is. And so it's interesting to see the dynamics there. It sounds like kind of a wild roadmap. Yeah, that's normal. That's what we're hearing all over the country. So thank you for sharing all of that. It was awesome. And thank you for getting on, Ivy. I'm such a fan of Belton, and you guys have been such stalwarts, like in digital transition, just like marching forward, like your whole team. It's just awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We love you guys at the Learning Council, and we appreciate all of your support and all of the stuff that you're doing. And we're getting there.
Yeah, we are. We're getting there. Well, good. Well, best of luck to you all there. I'm going to call on my next speaker, but thank you, Ivy.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next speaker is going to be Sister Teresa Joy, who's a 5th grade teacher at St. Mary's School, Oak Ridge. And we wanted to have her join because she's going to do something interesting, which is talking about motivation in math, how blended learning transformed her hybrid model. So Sister Teresa Joy, I'm going to pass you the presenter screen if you're ready for that. Okay, here it comes. Okay, you should have presenter status now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, yeah, and I see your screen now.
Wonderful. You can see all of that?
Yep.
Oh, no, I don't want to leave the webinar. Let me just move that to the side. All right. Well, if you can see that, I can just go ahead and get started then. So thank you so much for having me. As Leilani said, I'm Sister Teresa Joy, and I am a Dominican sister of St. Cecilia. Right now I'm serving as the 5th grade teacher at St. Mary's School here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And as she said, I would like to speak today about motivation in math class. What does that look like when I have some kids at home, some kids in school, and huge gaps left from summer slide and from COVID-19? I'd like to speak especially about how this blended learning model helped my students and is helping currently my students become independent, self-driven learners in math, which is such a challenge in a normal time, and even now it's even more so of a challenge. And I'm going to end with some takeaways that I've learned from this experience just in general, and some things that hopefully you can apply in your own classroom, no matter the grade level you teach, or some ideas that you can pass on to other teachers in your school. Let's get started. We have to start with what happened last quarter. So here at St. Mary's School, we went on spring break not quite anticipating that we would not be seeing our children after that. Fortunately, we are one-to-one with Chromebooks. So as we transitioned into the at-home distance learning model, we were able to help our students navigate whatever technological issues they needed as far as connecting to the classroom. Of course, each teacher and each student navigated this slightly differently. So we had some teachers doing the Zoom meetings in the morning and independent work time. We had some teachers who just did posting assignments to Google Classroom, doing more of the video model. We all did our best, but we have to face the fact that it does impact our students. It impacts our teaching, and it impacts what our students are coming in with this quarter. While the high quality instruction we attempted to maintain, when the students came back this August, it was really evident to me that there were some significant learning gaps, especially in math class. It could be that they had these gaps before they went home, but this extended summer slide that we experienced in conjunction with COVID-19 was not helpful in the learning gains perspective. In fact, I had my students take their benchmark testing the first week we were back, and I had 53% score below the expected benchmark for the beginning of 5th grade.
Hey, Sister Teresa?
Yes.
Just one little quick note. Your sound, your audio is a little muffled. Are you far away from your mic?
Not really, but I can scooch closer and I can speak up much louder.
Okay, yeah, that's a little better. We're getting some muffling on it, but I think it's okay. Okay, go ahead.
All right. If you can't hear me, please just let me know. As my students know, I can get pretty loud.
Okay, go ahead.
Mask over Zoom will help that. Thank you. So we take all of this, all of what our students are coming in with, our own experiences from last year, and to add to all of this, where exactly are our students this year? While most of our students chose to return to the brick and mortar school building at the beginning of this quarter, some families have chosen to continue to keep their children home during the pandemic. This means in my 5th grade classroom, I'm operating on the hybrid model. Students in school and students at home are joining us in real time through video conferencing. While I've been contemplating a transition to blended learning in math, this hybrid model is what really convinced me that I needed to try something different. There was something that needed to change. There was no good way that I found for me to teach math in a traditional manner while I had students on Zoom. They couldn't hear me. They couldn't see the board. I had no way of seeing if they were keeping up with the material. They couldn't interact with the class. They couldn't contribute their answers. I was really struggling with this. I needed a way to reach every student in my classroom, no matter whether they were here in person or virtually, or what level they were on. I needed to find a way to start filling in those gaps that they were missing. So I first heard about blended learning as I was working through what I kind of think of as my second master's degree in how to teach online during a pandemic, where I was desperately searching for a solution to the distance learning question. Now, if you just went to Google and typed in blended learning, there are tons of websites, articles, and courses out there. What I'm about to share is what works for me, and maybe it could work for you too. So what is blended learning? Again, there are so many definitions of blended learning, probably as there are teachers implementing it in their classrooms. What I think of blended learning is this. It is a method of instruction that balances the use of technology and personal instruction time to allow the student to be self-paced and in control of their own learning. It is a blend, it's a balance. What it's important to realize is this is not allowing technology to be the end-all be-all in the classroom. Technology in this case really is a tool. The prudent and constructive use of technology to facilitate a learning experience is so important. The learning experience has to be student-centered. It has to be centered on the child and not the use of technology for the sake of the use of technology. Blended learning is balanced learning. It's a balance between the interaction with technology and the teacher. It's a balance between independent work and partner work and group work. And it's a balance between maintaining the course of the curriculum in addition to filling in the gaps that are needed. It was important for me to define this right off the bat because, as you're about to see, the transition to and upkeep of blended learning can be really strenuous on the educator. But I think that the students are worth it. So talking about implementing blended learning, what does it look like behind the scenes? St. Mary's School uses the Google Suite for education, We have Google Classroom, Google Sites, Forms, Slides, and Jamboard. The Jamboard app is activated for my students even though we do not have an actual physical Jamboard. We use it through our one-to-one Chromebooks, and I have a school-provided iPad for my use. I originally started the blended learning solely from Google Classroom, but as I discovered later, that can be really challenging helping the students find the material that they're working on. So recently I have changed to a Google site where all of my videos, my students' mastery checks, all of their independent work can be found consolidated on that one site. It makes just life a lot easier for the students. I utilize Google Forms to complete mastery checks, which are short quizzes, 2 or 3 problems that are representative of the skill that I expect my students to know, to have learned during that lesson. They take a mastery check for every lesson, and it provides both of us, the student and me as the teacher, with instantaneous feedback on whether or not the student is understanding the concept that they're trying to learn. I use Google Slides to put together a little slide deck as I make my lesson videos. All of the lesson videos are teacher created, so they're hearing my voice. It's very much a familiar experience for them. And then I utilize Jamboard in 2 ways. The primary way is that is the way the students keep track of their own progress. I have a little screen with a bunch of Post-it notes where they just move their names as they progress through the lessons. So I know where they are, they know that I know where they are. And in fact, all of them can see where each other kind of is landing in the chapter, which is really important for partner work, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Jamboard has also been very helpful for my at-home learners, especially those who have touchscreen technology. Because I'm able to share the Jamboard with them, they can complete a problem using the touchscreen as if they were in my classroom at the whiteboard. I can see exactly what they're doing. I can walk them through problems. I can troubleshoot mistakes or issues that they're having with the content itself. We do use Zoom for we call them at-home learners. Zoom is our primary video conferencing platform. I use EduCreations for my video creation, which means I can add the picture of my slide and then I can write on it using a stylus or just my finger so that they're watching me walk through a problem. They're just not looking at printed text. Additionally, we have one-to-one Chromebooks, as I mentioned earlier, which would not be essential to a blended classroom because you could use shared technology, but it's definitely helpful in this time of COVID-19 where my students shouldn't really be sharing very much anyways. As far as that, and they know exactly, they have their tabs up, they have the math website bookmarked, they can just pick up right where they left off the next day. I do continue to use the math program, so I'm not just making up a curriculum as I go along. I use the diocese given curriculum for my students. It's just a different way of delivering that content, but I'm still utilizing those tools, especially for independent practice, which they're doing in their workbooks. What's great is these are pictures from my classroom as it is. So these are students in all of their different modes of learning. One of the great things about blended learning is it really accommodates a lot of different learning preferences as far as seating, location, because I'm not in front of the class teaching them. They're free to do whatever work is most comfortable for them as long as they're maintaining social distance. All right, so there are 3 different types of work in blended learning in the way that I do it. The first is individual work, which includes watching the lesson video, which as I said earlier, I create and post, and then completing the mastery check. That mastery check, I have them do as individual, independent work, so I know it's that student's work and no one else's. Once they've completed the lesson video, they are allowed to ask permission to work with a partner or with group work. This partner or group work is the independent practice as it's named in our math program. So it's just practice problems so that they can develop the skills, work through the content on their own or with a partner with a group. And then a lesson reteach. With the mastery checks, they must get a 100 on the mastery check to move to the next lesson. If they don't get a 100 on the first mastery check, we do something called a lesson reteach, which means they rewatch the lesson video, they complete more independent practice problems, and then they receive what we call a reteach. They work one-on-one with either me or another student so they can troubleshoot the issue. What's really happening when I tried to complete this problem? Where is my thinking going wrong here? Where am I making a mistake? Sometimes I have found that they're more open to the reteach coming from another student than they are from me, because it's that collaborative effort. They're a team working on the math. It's not just, okay, I need to get the problem right. It's much more process-based than product-based. Finally, conferences with sisters. So I meet with each of the students. Even if they don't need a reteach, I check in with them. Hey, how are you doing? Are you going through all of the independent practice? Are you showing your work? Are you getting these problems correct? Where are you having trouble? And also speaking with the students, how is your focus during work time? What is a way you can better utilize your individual time? What's a better way you can better utilize your group work time? These conferences have been really enlightening to me because I'm able to work individually with the student. And it's in those conferences where if I see, okay, a student has a gap that needs to be filled, that's where I'm able to fill that gap. I can have a little one-on-one lesson with that student. Hey, I notice that you're still really having trouble with this concept. I notice you're really still having problems with multi-digit multiplication. Let's walk through this. What's happening here? What are you forgetting to do? How do we think about this differently? So these different types of work I've found to be highly successful for camaraderie and team building, as well as reinforcement for the students who are doing well. Since the students can see who has already passed the lessons, they go to those students and say, hey, I saw that you already understood how to divide with a 3-digit dividend. Could you help me with this, please? So those students who are getting a little farther ahead are able to go back and help their classmates who might be struggling with different concepts. And the students know that someday that might flip. They might be the one helping the other student instead of them always receiving the help. All right, so what does this look like during class? We begin with a class meeting, usually using Jamboard. We just have a whole class check-in. Who's working on what? What are we planning on doing today? After that, the students work at their own pace. They move their names on the Jamboard when they move on to the next lesson, and all of the lesson materials are accessible through Google Sites. The students either request a meeting with me or I call them over to check in. And this is, other than 10 minutes to work on math facts at the very beginning, this is what we do during class. It's very self-paced and individual for the student, what they're working on. So what are the motivating factors here? What makes this style of teaching so motivating for the students? And really, when I started, I was kind of surprised at how motivated my students became during math. So the first motivating factor is the ownership of progress through the material on the part of the students. It is the student's responsibility to work through the material before the chapter test. They know when the test is going to be. So if they're falling behind, sister, how can I make up these lessons? Sister, I'm really having trouble with this. Is there a time when I can come in and work independently just to kind of get caught up? They're required to take ownership of their learning. Of course, this is teacher directed. I facilitate this. I mean, we're talking about 10 and 11-year-olds. So the ownership needs to be at a level that they can understand. But in this process, they're learning habits that are going to take them beyond the content, such as responsibility, keeping focused on a task, and analyzing what they need to do to keep moving. Additionally, as I was first implementing blended learning, and still now, I'm constantly asking for feedback from my students. What's working for you? What can I do differently to help you? Is there a different method of teaching that would be more helpful for you in this situation? I'm asking them for feedback on the usability of the platforms. Can they understand what I'm saying on the videos? Am I going too fast on the videos? Do they need more clarification? We as a class are constantly reflecting individually and together about improvements that could be made both on the process of the blended learning, but also our performance. What can we do as a class to stay more focused during this time? What can we do as a class to support each other as we continue to learn? The second motivating factor I found is the taste of success. Students are tracking their own learning gains. Through the Jamboard and the mastery checks, students are able to see their own growth. Getting a mastery check 100% right on the first go round can really be a game changer for these students. And what I've noticed is that these little successes, especially for my learners who struggle a little bit more than the others, can be such a motivating factor because they realize, yes, I can do this. Thirdly, differentiation for learning preferences. I think this is most clearly seen in the student choice of whether to work alone or with a group, but it's also shown in the fact that students can sit pretty much wherever they want in my classroom to learn. And if I'm not able to teach a concept in a way they can understand, they have 12 other students who may be able to explain it to them differently. With this style of learning, the teaching is not limited to what my one brain can do. It's all of us together. The support and encouragement from their classmates directly relates to this. The atmosphere in my math classroom has totally changed. We know those students who you mention the word math and all of a sudden they're tensed up, their heads on their desk. I don't want to go to math class. But in blended learning, because they're learning at their own pace, they're not being put on the spot in front of the entire class. For my students who might be a little bit more insecure, they're just working with me one-on-one. I'm the only one who can see the mistakes that they're making. It really can be a game changer because they have the freedom now to try something and to make a mistake. Children learn math through mistakes, through trial and error, through continual attempts. With blended learning, those students who wouldn't be encouraged to do that in a traditional classroom are able to. Additionally, the students understand that the class as a whole is only as focused as their least focused classmate. Students encourage one another not only on the material, but also in their execution of the task at hand. And finally, I think a motivating factor is a little healthy competition. The students can see where their classmates are as a class. But the competition is different than I have seen in a traditional classroom. Now my students are having races to see who can get the correct answer first if they're working together. Who can get the most problems correct? Who can get through a lesson without needing a mastery check retake? And it's not the attitude of, this makes me so much better than you. It's, Let's see who's really mastered this material. And if you haven't mastered it, let me help you get there. The students know they're on the same team, and like good teammates, they're pushing each other to be the best they can be, while at the same time allowing themselves to be pushed by the people they're playing with. Through all of this, I have 3 big takeaways, just for myself personally, and hopefully they'll help you too. So over the course of this presentation, I've walked you through why I chose blended learning, how I implemented it in my 5th grade math classroom, and the motivating factors that I'm seeing. So here are my 3 takeaways. If something isn't working, don't be afraid to change. This is what got me first into blended learning. And to be honest, I was pretty terrified the first couple of weeks. I had students on about 5 different lessons at a time. I was wondering how that was going to work. I was wondering if my classroom management was just going to run away, that students were going to take over. Fortunately, I have great coworkers and wonderful administrators who really encouraged me when I first went to them with this idea, who are available to field questions, who are available to provide different insights and ideas, and who are genuinely interested in success in the classroom. What I was doing wasn't working, and I needed to change it. As a caveat, however, once you change, you have to give it a chance before changing it again. There really is a balance here, just like with the rest of the blended learning. The second takeaway is your kids are a team and you are the coach, which is to say you're all on one team. It's not about one person being right and other people being wrong. It's about teamwork all together. Finally, don't do for the students what they could and should do for themselves. So this is a significant concept in the writings of Maria Montessori, but I found it to be true in the classroom in general and in blended learning in particular. Students need to learn to be problem solvers. And the way they do that is by encountering problems and solving them. Blended learning releases the responsibility for meaningful progress into the hands of the student, which means that I, the teacher, need to give them the space and the place and the grace to make mistakes. In a truly safe classroom, children don't need to fear getting an answer wrong as long as they're trying their best. This has been evident in blended learning, that the students are growing more comfortable with the process of learning and are less afraid to be wrong and are more willing to do the work of learning, which is why they're here in the first place. In such a classroom, extrinsic motivation becomes less necessary and intrinsic motivation starts to take over. I just want to finish by saying this has been such a great reminder for me that we really do teach children and not subjects. So while this blended learning method has worked for me in my classroom, it may not work with the children that you have. In fact, with the children I have next year, it might not work either. As educators, I think this should be our motivation. How do I teach the child in front of me? And it is with this in mind that we can inspire students to be motivated to learn. So thank you so much for listening. I don't know if we have any time, if there are any questions, but I am so grateful that you joined us today.
Well, let me be just grateful back. Sister Teresa, the comments that you made about making learning team oriented, I think is a huge lesson learned. I don't think a lot of people are really thinking that way. I mean, I don't know every teacher in America, but this was an awesome way to frame the change and what's been successful for you, and the fact that you're also teaching in 2 modes, but maintaining the view that, you know, everyone's sort of also co-responsible along the way. I think it's one of the biggest shifts that America's ever seen. And I've talked to a lot of leaders about this in K-12 schools all across America, is the fact that what really happened when quarantines came in is that millions of American students had the mantle of responsibility quickly put on their shoulders, and parents. Whereas before, for maybe far too long, we've been sort of lulled into, you just go and something is done to you to educate you. So the idea of that responsibility is just, it's a beautiful idea. And I think it's so timely, and it's obviously such a huge need. And I just really want to thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. I really don't think, this I think has been the silver lining for me in COVID is developing this in my own classroom. I don't think I would have gone to it if I hadn't been forced to, really, in a way. But it has been such a gift to me as an educator to really realize what these students are capable of and what they want to do, because they really do have a deep desire to learn and to be an agent in their learning. They don't want to be a passive recipient. They want to be engaged in the material, and to find a way where they can do that has been really encouraging to me as an educator.
Yeah, and I love it. And I think the lesson that you taught us all today was brilliant and timely. So I'm going to thank you so much for sharing and move on here. But once again, thank you, Sister Teresa Joy.
Thank you for having me.